What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're gonna work on the V6 MR2. We're doing some unplanned suspension mods. In particular, we're gonna be putting on these top hats. Full transparency, the top hats were actually meant for the white MR2, but unfortunately that car's sitting in storage because it's broken. The V6 MR2 is actually running BCBR coilovers, and because of that, I didn't wanna make any more suspension changes until I bought new coilovers next year. Considering the white MR2 is broken, I said why not just go ahead and throw them on here and make some use of the parts in the meantime. The parts we'll be installing today are from Wilhelm Raceworks. So we got his front coilover top hats and the rear coilover top hats. There's a couple benefits to running these top hats. So a couple of them include better camber curves. You can also fit a wider tire. There is a third one which is specific to the front mounts, and that is you get increased caster. Although I believe that's only with the standard and the extreme versions. I think there's a mild version. I do not know if that one impacts caster at all. So definitely check his website out, and I'll make sure to link to that below. Here's the top hat for my BC coilovers, and they're cool because it pushes the coilover more towards the midline of the car. The Wilhelm top hat actually pushes it even further towards the midline of the car, but it also brings it back a little bit. So this adjuster knob will actually move over here, although you won't be able to run the adjuster knob anymore, so you'll just have to use a little Allen wrench to adjust the coilovers. What I think is even cooler about these top hats is that they have additional holes. So this is actually the old style. I bought these when these were on clearance sale, and if you notice, there's not any other holes here. So the old style, essentially he made the holes and that was it. With the new style of top hats that he has multiple holes, so you can have it at different settings. And when it comes to a project car like this, of course I'm always going to be tinkering with it, so it's really nice to have that option. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. You do not need a impact like I have. Honestly, just some basic wrenches, a breaker bar. You may need a hammer, a rubber mallet would be preferred actually, a measuring stick, so just basic tools to get this on out. To start the install, we're going to remove the end link. I have a wrench holding the stud, and on the other end I'm using a socket to remove the bolt. Now I'm turning the whole assembly to get better access to the brakes. I'm going to remove the brake line, and then from there I'm going to undo the two 12mm bolts that are holding the brake caliper in place. It just slides on off. Takes a little bit of force sometimes. I am breaking loose the crash bolts. It'll make my life a little bit easier. I have aftermarket end links on my car, so I'll need to hold one end while I hit it with the impact on the other. I am pulling off the crash bolts. The knuckle can then be disconnected from the coilover. Now it's just a matter of undoing the top bolts and the coilover will just come on out. The coilover came out super easy, which is always a nice thing. With it out, it would also be a really good time to clean stuff up. Fortunately for me, mine's actually pretty clean. We are going to start disassembling the coilover, and something to take into consideration is how much preload your spring has. Everyone's setup's gonna be a little bit different, but if you have a bunch of preload, you're probably gonna wanna take some of that out before taking off the top hat. Otherwise, the spring can go flying. I'm not too worried about that because I don't have a lot in here. It's pretty much what BC says to do. To remove the top hat, I will loosen up the dampening adjuster, then I'll unscrew it. After that, I'll use my impact to zip off the bolt. The top hat will then just slide on off. If you want, you could disassemble the coilover further, but you don't honestly have to. Here's a side-by-side comparison of just other top hats that you'd see on different coilovers, and then the Wilhelm ones. On these ones, you're gonna be able to make adjustments here at the top, which will obviously impact the amount of camber you have. On this one, no. It's set really far towards the midline of the car, and the idea is you're actually adjust the camber where the knuckle and the coilover meet. It will be really important to get in alignment after doing this. The top hats are side-specific, so make sure you grab the correct one. Here's the hardware, 2 nuts and 2 washers. At the minimum, 1 washer will go in between the spring perch and the top hat. Depending on your specific setup, you may need more washers for clearance just in case anything hits the chassis. Now I'm screwing on the nut. Unfortunately, it wasn't screwing on easily. I realized I got the wrong thread pitch for one of the pairs. That means I will not be installing the rear top hats in this video, but that's okay because I didn't plan on it anyways, and we'll talk about that later. The nut that holds everything together does not need a lot of force, so I put it on the lowest setting and just kind of gave it 1 or 2 ugga-duggas, called it good. I'm just double checking the preload and it was good. We got the coilover put together and it went together pretty smooth. The instructions that Wilhelm Raceworks gives are pretty straightforward. Pretty much all that's left is to put this back in the car, and then from there I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to adjust ride height, but I'll kind of deal with that once I do the other side at a later date. I did want to point out though that you won't be able to run the adjuster anymore, mainly because it's going to be covered up by the strut tower. Instead, what you can do is actually just use a Allen key onto the last part, and that's putting the coilover back. I like to start everything by hand, then I'll take the impact and just kind of snug it down. I apologize for my hands being in the way, but I'm putting the crash bolts back in, but I'm not snugging them down just yet. And the tie rod will just slide back into place. For easy access to the brakes, I turn everything in, I put the caliper back on. Then I like to start both bolts by hand. Once they're threaded in, then I'll start using the wrench. Can't forget to put the brake line back in place. I'm reconnecting the end link to the sway bar, holding the stud as I tighten everything down. These top hats produce a lot of camber, so I pull the spindle out and snug it down in that position so I don't have excessive camber for my application.
We got everything back together and it fit pretty good just as advertised.
I'm not going to do the other side just because it's the same as this one, and I'm trying not to be super repetitive. Now for the back side, I'm not going to be installing them in this video, mainly because I'm still trying to decide what to do. A while back, I did test fit the rear plates on this car just to see how the fitment would be like, and what I ran into was the coilover actually coming in contact with the chassis, and that actually is a stated problem on the Wilhelm Raceworks website. I actually supported the rear suspension, so it's not at full droop, and I still had issues with the contact. That put me in a position where either I could hammer out the chassis or I could just switch to coilovers, and I believe I mentioned this earlier in the video, but I have plans to actually buy different ones at the end of this season. I'm not ready to commit to hammering something out because like the front top hats, that's totally reversible, but hammering something out, obviously I can't really come back from that, so I'm not ready to commit. And what I'm hoping is with the new setup I'm looking at getting, that won't be an issue, because if the coilovers had a shorter range of travel, it may not necessarily be an issue. Although I feel like I am just delaying the inevitable, and it's probably going to have to happen. And for those who have never seen any of the videos, I do just want to point out that this is a purpose-built track toy. It's the car's only purpose, but it still pains me to bash it up. One other thing to consider if you're thinking about getting these top hats is that because of the added caster, you may actually have some rubbing on the back of the wheel well. And what can help fix that is actually adjustable strut rods. What that will allow you to do is actually adjust the caster and pull the wheel forward in the wheel well to help minimize rubbing. If you have an early MR2, you already have them from the factory. If not, you can buy these Megan Racing ones. I actually recommend the Wilhelm Racing strut rods. I run them on my other MR2. They've taken 1.5 years of abuse. They've been fantastic. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the Wilhelm top hats. And actually why I got this next set was because of his revision. I really like the idea of being able to switch between standard setup and the extreme. So I actually wanted to go to the extreme and see how that felt, because the setup on that car is way more aggressive than this. It's like a 17x9 in the front with a 245. So for an MR2, that's pretty meaty. Anyways, that's all I got for this video. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer them. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one.